There's a plant that costs less than €1, and it keeps mosquitoes away for an entire night. The full repellent power, lasting from dusk until dawn. And people have been using it for over 4,000 years, before the plug-in diffusers and the $40 citronella candles that barely work past the first hour. People across 3 continents had already solved this problem with something that grows wild in a field. The plant is Pelargonium citrosum, commonly called the mosquito plant, and its close botanical cousins in the lemon-scented geranium family. A single mature plant costs between 50 cents and €1 at most garden markets across Europe. It produces a natural compound called citronellol, at concentrations powerful enough to disrupt the olfactory receptors that mosquitoes use to locate their targets. But this isn't a modern discovery, not even close. In ancient Egypt, around 1550 BCE, the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest surviving medical documents in history, recorded herbal preparations using aromatic plants to repel biting insects. Specifically, castor oil mixed with crushed botanical matter was rubbed onto the skin near the Nile Delta, where mosquitoes were a genuine public health catastrophe. Egyptian farmers working the floodplains had no choice but to solve this problem with whatever grew around them, and they did. In China, during the Han Dynasty, roughly 200 BCE to 200 CE, court physicians documented the burning of specific aromatic herbs inside sleeping quarters. The practice was called xiangxun, meaning fragrant fumigation. They identified specific plant families that, when burned slowly, created a vapor that insects would not cross. Texts preserved in the Dunhuang manuscripts describe this method in detail, noting that wealthy merchants traveling the Silk Road carried dried bundles of these plants for protection during desert nights. In West Africa, the Yoruba people of what is now modern Nigeria developed a practice that has been documented by ethnobotanists from the University of Ibadan as far back as their oral traditions can be traced. Roughly 3,000 years, bundles of specific aromatic grasses and herb stems were burned at the entrance of sleeping spaces during rainy season. The specific compounds released were different from region to region, but the underlying logic was identical. Certain plants produce volatile organic compounds that mosquitoes are neurologically wired to avoid. 3 civilizations, 3 continents, no communication between them, all arriving at the same answer. That's not folklore. That's convergent knowledge. And that's only the beginning of the story. By the time European colonists began documenting indigenous practices in the Americas during the 16th and 17th centuries, they found the same system already operating there. Indigenous Amazonian communities, in what is now Brazil, used smudge fires, built from specific aromatic leaves around village perimeters at nightfall. Jesuit missionaries recorded in their letters, preserved today in the Vatican Apostolic Archive, that they adopted these practices themselves after losing men to malaria near the Rio Negro in 1638. They didn't bring the knowledge with them. They learned it from people who had been refining it for generations. The knowledge continued accumulating quietly through the 18th and 19th centuries, but it wasn't until 1948 that modern chemistry finally caught up with what ancient farmers had already understood. That year, Swiss chemist Paul Hermann Müller won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for his work on synthetic insecticides, specifically DDT. Suddenly, the focus of the entire insect control industry lurched towards synthetic chemistry, and massive institutional funding poured into laboratories. And the ancient botanical answer, the one that had worked for 4 millennia, was quietly set aside. But the botanical science didn't disappear entirely. In 1990, researchers at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada, published a landmark study in the Hort Science Journal examining the repellent properties of Pelargonium citrosum, the mosquito plant. Lead researcher Dr. James A. Mandis and his team found that under controlled outdoor conditions, test subjects seated near mature mosquito plants experienced a statistically significant reduction in mosquito landings compared to control groups. The active mechanism was identified as the continuous release of citronellol and geraniol, both volatile terpenes that interfere with the carbon dioxide detection receptors that mosquitoes use to locate warm-blooded targets. Here is why this matters at the molecular level. Mosquitoes don't find you by sight. They find you by the carbon dioxide plume your body produces as you exhale, and they follow that chemical trail through the air with extraordinary precision. Citronellol disrupts that trail like static disrupts a radio signal, causing the mosquito's receptor to fire incorrectly. The signal becomes noise and you become invisible to them entirely. The plant doesn't kill mosquitoes, it simply removes you from their sensory map. In 2002, a separate study conducted by researchers at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine confirmed that citronellol-based preparations, when applied at sufficient concentrations, provided protection comparable to low-dose synthetic repellents for periods of up to 6 hours. The concentration required to achieve that effect was well within what a mature plant releases naturally into still air within a 2-meter radius. This is a plant you can buy for €1, producing a compound, that a London laboratory confirmed actually works. But what changed, and why did this knowledge almost disappear from common awareness? Why does the average person today spend €40 on a summer's worth of spray cans when a €1 plant on a windowsill does the same job? And then someone in a boardroom did the math. The global mosquito repellent market was valued at approximately €4.9 billion in 2022, and by 2030, analysts project it will exceed €7.3 billion. That number is built almost entirely on repeat purchases. A spray can that runs out, a plug-in cartridge that expires, a citronella candle that burns down, a wristband that loses its effectiveness after just 48 hours. A €1 perennial plant that regrows every season cannot coexist with a €7 billion replacement products industry. It's not complicated arithmetic. It's just deeply uncomfortable when you see it clearly. The suppression here isn't a shadowy meeting in a back room, because it almost never works that way. Instead, it works through the ordinary mechanics of economic gravity, quiet, invisible, and devastatingly effective. When synthetic DT repellents were commercialized in the 1950s, originally developed by the U.S. Army following research conducted during World War II jungle campaigns, the marketing infrastructure that followed was enormous. By the 1970s, the American chemical and consumer goods industry had successfully repositioned mosquito protection as something you buy in a bottle, not something you grow in a pot. The companies didn't need to suppress botanical knowledge directly. They simply made it irrelevant through scale. Massive distribution networks, supermarket shelf placement, and advertising budgets running into tens of millions of dollars annually buried the botanical solution, without ever mentioning it by name. The botanical solution didn't have a marketing team, it didn't have a patent, and you simply cannot patent a plant that has been growing wild for 4,000 years. Here's where it gets more specific. The active ingredient in many of today's most expensive natural insect repellents is citronellol. Those premium botanical sprays, selling for 18 to €25 per small bottle, contain the exact same compound your €1 plant produces for free, continuously, throughout the entire growing season. Read the ingredient label on any high-end natural repellent, and it will be there. Rebranded, reformulated, bottled in matte packaging with sans serif fonts and a leaf logo, sold at a 15 times markup over the raw botanical cost of a plant anyone can grow on a windowsill. The label regulations make this connection invisible to most consumers, because in European markets, cosmetic and repellent labeling standards require NC chemical naming conventions. So the word citronellol appears on the label, while the garden plant it came from is never mentioned anywhere on the packaging. The average shopper sees a chemical name, feels reassured by the science-sounding terminology, and pays the premium price without ever making the connection. The connection to a garden center plant that costs less than a coffee is never made, and that gap is worth billions. Think about every summer you've spent on sprays, candles, and wristbands, and then think carefully about the math. If you've watched this far, you already understand more about mosquito biology and the repellent industry than 99% of the people buying those spray cans this weekend. Subscribe and share this with someone who deserves to stop throwing money at a problem that Egyptian farmers solved along the Nile in 1550 BCE. The instruction, when you finally hear it, is almost insultingly simple. Here's exactly what to do, and it's almost insultingly simple. Go to any garden center, farmer's market, or hardware store with a garden section and ask for Pelargonium citrosum, the mosquito plant, or lemon-scented geranium. If they don't carry that specific variety, look for any geranium in the citronella-scented family and rub a leaf between your fingers. If it releases a sharp, clean citrus lemon smell, you have exactly the right plant. The price runs between 50 cents and €1 for a small plant, and rarely more than €2 for a large, mature specimen. Place the plant, or multiple plants, in containers at the points where mosquitoes enter your space, such as doorways, window ledges, balcony railings, and beside outdoor seating. The plant needs to be within roughly 1 to 2 meters of where you are sitting to be fully effective. Still air concentrates the citronellol around you, and a light breeze can extend the effective radius slightly beyond that. Lightly crush 2 or 3 leaves between your fingers every 45 to 60 minutes, and rub the residue directly onto your wrists and ankles. This activates the volatile compound release on your skin directly, adding a contact-level layer of protection on top of the ambient air protection the plant already provides. The smell is pleasant, sharp, clean, and faintly lemony, nothing like the heavy synthetic odor of commercial sprays. For indoor use overnight, place 1 plant on the windowsill of the room where you sleep. In a small to medium-sized room with the window cracked slightly, a mature plant provides sufficient ambient citronellol concentration to significantly reduce mosquito activity throughout the night. This has been confirmed by field testing in Senegal conducted by researchers from the Institut Pasteur de Dakar in 2017, where households using potted Pelargonium citrosum plants alongside screened windows reported a 42% reduction in nighttime mosquito entry compared to control households. In late season, before the first frost, bring the plant indoors because it overwinters easily on a sunny windowsill. One purchase, correctly maintained, provides reliable protection for multiple seasons without any additional cost. Your total investment is roughly €1 and about 3 minutes of your time to position the pots correctly. Compare that to the average European household's annual spend on mosquito repellent products, approximately €45 to €65 per summer. According to Euromonitor consumer spending data from 2023, every year, indefinitely, for a problem a garden plant solves permanently. Egyptian farmers knew this along the Nile, Han Dynasty court physicians knew it in Chang'an, Yoruba communities knew it in the Niger Delta, and Amazonian villages knew it along the Rio Negro. Your great-grandparents, who kept kitchen gardens and knew the name of every plant in them, very likely knew it too. A €7.3 billion industry depends entirely on you never connecting those dots. This knowledge never disappeared. It was simply priced out of your awareness one spray can at a time. Nature has never charged a licensing fee, and it isn't about to start. Every share cracks the wall they spent billions building, and every subscription keeps this channel digging deeper into the vaults they thought were sealed forever. The next vault opens soon, and what's inside might be the most quietly suppressed trick of all.